They told me my dreams didn't matter, and then handed my college fund to my stepbrother so he could chase his music career. I was crushed and humiliated. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Lila Harper, and I had always worked hard. At 18, I was the top student in my class, dreaming of becoming a doctor. I had saved every penny from part-time jobs to help pay for college, believing that my efforts would finally be recognized. But my parents didn't see it that way. They had a son from my father's previous marriage, Keelan. He was charming and confident, but reckless and careless. Instead of supporting my dreams, they decided to give my entire college fund to him, claiming he needed it more for his music career. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the empty college account, and feeling my world crumble. Keelan was thrilled, talking about guitars and studio sessions, while I felt invisible. I was heartbroken and angry. All those years of hard work felt meaningless. My parents' words stung more than the loss of money. They had made it clear that my dreams didn't matter to them. I felt abandoned, undervalued, and betrayed. But I refused to let this define me. I quietly started searching for scholarships and part-time jobs, determined to find a way to fund my education. I tutored younger students, worked at a local cafe, and studied late into the night for medical entrance exams. Every time I thought about giving up, I reminded myself that my future didn't depend on anyone else's approval. Keelan's excitement over his music only fueled my determination to succeed. One day, I met Dr. Simone Ortega, a family friend who had always admired my dedication. She encouraged me to apply to a prestigious medical school that offered full scholarships. Her belief in me reignited my hope. With her guidance and my hard work, I earned the scholarship. I finally had the opportunity to chase my dream on my own terms. Keelan's music career soon faltered, and my parents began to realize their mistake. They came to me, apologizing and asking for help, but I had learned that my success didn't need their validation. I quietly excelled in medical school, graduated at the top of my class, and opened my own clinic. Seeing them finally recognize my achievements was satisfying, but I didn't need revenge and anger. My success was the ultimate response to their betrayal. In the end, I realized that sometimes the best way to overcome betrayal is to focus on yourself. I turned pain into strength and hard work into triumph. My parents' choice to favor Keelan could not stop me from achieving my dream. When I was little, my father and I were inseparable. He would take me to the park, help me with school projects, and cheer me on at every small achievement. I always felt safe and supported when I was with him. My mother, on the other hand, stayed distant. She rarely spent time with me, and her words often carried a cold judgment instead of encouragement. Growing up, I learned to rely on myself and the little support my father could offer. Even as a child, I loved the idea of saving. I would keep my allowance in a small tin box, dreaming of the day it could help me pay for college. I babysat neighborhood kids, delivered newspapers, and did odd chores for neighbors. Every coin I saved felt like a step closer to my future. I imagined the pride my parents would feel if they knew how serious I was about school and my dreams. Keelan was always around, charming everyone with his easy smile and playful energy. But even as a kid, I noticed a subtle tension between us. He would roll his eyes at my accomplishments or brag about minor talents he had. My parents often made comparisons. Why can't you be more like Keelan? Or Keelan is so natural at this, why can't you try harder? Their words stung, leaving me feeling as if my own efforts were never enough. I tried to ignore it, but the unfairness started to weigh heavily on me. I remember one moment clearly. I had saved enough from my small jobs to buy a set of biology books I needed for school. I showed them proudly to my father, hoping for a little acknowledgement. He smiled and patted my head, but my mother barely looked up, whispering that Keelan's music lessons were more important. That small moment planted a seed of resentment and sadness inside me. I realized that no matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I sacrificed, I would always be seen as second to Keelan in my parents' eyes. As the years went by, that feeling of injustice grew. I watched Keelan get attention and resources I had earned through sweat and careful planning. He didn't need to save, he didn't need to struggle, and he was praised constantly. Meanwhile, I quietly worked harder, studied longer, and kept my dreams alive even when it felt like no one else cared. That silent determination became a part of me, shaping my character and my resolve to someday prove that I was worth more than they thought. By the time I reached my late teens, I understood clearly. I could no longer depend on anyone to recognize my potential. I had to fight for it myself. That early childhood awareness of being second, overlooked, and underestimated became the foundation of my drive, preparing me for the challenges I would face later in life. By the time I was finishing high school, I realized I couldn't wait for anyone to help me. I decided to take matters into my own hand. Quietly, without telling my parents, I began researching every scholarship I could find. I filled out applications late at night, wrote essays that poured out my dedication, and submitted recommendation letters from teachers who knew my determination. I didn't care about recognition at home. All that mattered was creating a path forward for myself. Meanwhile, Keelan seemed to live in his own world. He would come home carrying his new guitar, talking endlessly about upcoming recording sessions and gigs he planned to attend. He didn't ask about school, about my progress, or even notice my long hours of preparation. He was so caught up in his excitement that I almost envied his ability to dream without obstacles. But that envy quickly turned into frustration, because it reminded me how little my parents valued my efforts. When I tried to mention my plans or the scholarships I was pursuing, my parents barely reacted. My father nodded politely but didn't offer any support, and my mother laughed softly, saying I was taking things too seriously for someone my age. Their dismissive words cut deeper than I expected. It was like they were intentionally ignoring all the work I had done, all the sacrifices I had made. I felt like I was invisible in the very house that was supposed to nurture me. That night, I went to my room and sat on the floor, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I finally let myself cry, letting out the hurt, the anger, and the frustration that I had held inside for so long. The tears blurred my vision, but they also brought a strange clarity. I realized that this moment didn't have to break me. If anything, it could fuel me. I made a silent promise to myself. No one's opinion, no one's favoritism, and no one's dismissal would dictate what I could achieve. I decided that from that point forward, my worth would not be measured by my parents' approval or Keelan's charm. I would work quietly, persistently, and relentlessly to create the life I want. I understood then that determination wasn't just about completing assignments or winning recognition. It was about believing in myself when no one else did. That night became a turning point. My sorrow transformed into resolve, and I knew I would not allow this betrayal to define me. Instead, I would let it drive me forward, one step closer to the future I had always dreamed of. After that night of tears, I knew I had to take action. I couldn't rely on anyone else to support my dreams, so I started looking for every opportunity to earn money. I tutored children in math and science, helped neighbors with grocery shopping, and even delivered papers early in the mornings before school. Each job was exhausting, but I welcomed the challenge because every dollar brought me closer to my goal of attending college on my own terms. Even after long days of work, I refused to stop studying. At night, I would sit at my desk under the dim light of a small lamp, going over medical books, memorizing terms, and practicing entrance exam questions. My eyes would often sting from tiredness, and my body ached from the hours spent on my feet, but I reminded myself that this was temporary. Every late night was an investment in a future that was completely mine. Keelan, meanwhile, continued to flaunt his early success. He talked about friends who wanted to collaborate, local shows he was invited to perform at, and how quickly people were noticing his talent. At first, I felt a pang of jealousy, seeing him achieve recognition with little effort while I was struggling. But that feeling quickly shifted into determination. I decided that if he could succeed without discipline, I could surpass him by combining talent with hard work, focus, and perseverance. His bragging became fuel, motivating me to push even harder toward my dream. To keep myself organized and motivated, I started a journal. Every evening, I wrote down my goals, my daily achievements, and small victories I didn't want to forget. Passing a difficult practice test, helping a student understand a tough concept, saving a set amount of money, all of it went into the journal. It became a record of my persistence and proof that I was capable of more than anyone, including my parents, had imagined. Within those pages, I also began to write what I privately called my revenge plan. Not revenge through anger or confrontation, but through success so undeniable that it would leave no doubt about my worth. I envisioned graduating with honors, attending a respected medical school, and building a life that reflected all the effort, sacrifice, and resilience I had poured into myself. Every entry in my journal reinforced my resolve, reminding me that I was in control of my future. I worked tirelessly, balancing multiple jobs, long study sessions, and the growing pressure of college applications. Each challenge made me stronger, more focused, and more confident. I knew the journey would be difficult, but I also knew that no one could take away what I was building with my own hands. Slowly, step by step, I was laying the foundation for the life I deserved, a life that would prove my parents and Keelan wrong without a single word spoken. One afternoon, while helping at a local clinic, I met Dr. Simone Ortega. She was a family friend, though I hadn't spent much time with her before. Unlike my parents, she seemed genuinely interested in me and my ambitions. She asked about my studies, my goals, and the challenges I was facing. For the first time in a long time, Someone listened without judgment or comparison. Her encouragement felt like a breath of fresh air, and I quickly realized she believed in my potential more than anyone in my family ever had. Dr. Ortega noticed my determination and the careful planning I had been doing in secret. She smiled as I shared my aspirations to become a doctor, and she didn't dismiss them as unrealistic. Instead, she suggested I apply to a prestigious medical program that offered scholarships for students who demonstrated dedication and resilience. At first, I was hesitant, thinking such opportunities were out of reach for someone in my situation. But her confidence in me planted a seed of hope I hadn't felt before. With Dr. Ortega's guidance, I began to research the program thoroughly. I learned about the rigorous application process, the essays I needed to write, and the recommendation letters required. She offered to review my essays and even provided me with tips on how to highlight my perseverance and unique experiences. With every conversation, my vision of the future became clearer. I started picturing a life where I could succeed on my own merits, away from my parents' constant comparisons and favoritism toward Keelan. Meeting Dr. Ortega also helped me distance myself emotionally from the unfair treatment I had endured at home. I realized that the frustration and anger I carried toward my parents had kept me tied to their approval. Slowly, I began to focus on what I could control: my actions, my decisions, and my future. I imagined myself thriving in a place where effort and dedication were recognized, where I wouldn't be overshadowed or undervalued. This vision motivated me even more than anger or resentment ever could. Her belief in me gave me courage. For the first time, I allowed myself to dream boldly and plan with confidence. I no longer measured my worth by Keelan's achievements or my parents' attention. Instead, I measured it by my own dedication and the steps I was taking to reach my goals. Dr. Ortega's guidance became a turning point, not just in my academic journey, but in my personal growth. She helped me see that success was possible without anyone's validation, and that my potential was something I could define on my own terms. With her support, I began preparing my scholarship application with renewed focus. Each essay, each detail, and each step in the process reminded me that I was capable of more than I had imagined. For the first time, I felt truly independent, hopeful, and ready to take control of my future. Meeting Dr. Ortega didn't just give me a mentor. It gave me a glimpse of the life I could create for myself, free from favoritism and full of possibility. Months of long nights, endless study sessions, and multiple jobs finally began to pay off. The day I received the scholarship letter was unforgettable. My hands shook as I opened the envelope, and tears welled up in my eyes. I had done it. Every struggle, every exhausted evening, every moment I had doubted myself had led to this achievement. A full scholarship meant I could finally attend college without the heavy burden of financial worry, and it was proof that my efforts had been worth it. Meanwhile, Keelan's music career, which had seemed so promising, started to stumble. His early excitement and lack of discipline caught up with him quickly. Shows were canceled, opportunities fell through, and he struggled to stay consistent. I couldn't help but notice the contrast between our paths. While he had relied on charm and luck, I had invested sweat, patience, and persistence. It wasn't about him failing. It was about the satisfaction of seeing my dedication produce real results. When I returned home to share my scholarship news, my parents barely reacted. My father offered a brief nod, and my mother made a small, dismissive comment, as if it was just another achievement to acknowledge politely. Their reaction could have been discouraging, but I chose to ignore it. I realized that their approval was no longer necessary. What mattered was my own understanding of how far I had come. Their downplaying of my success only reinforced that my achievements were entirely my own. Through this journey, I discovered a new sense of resilience. I had faced disappointment, neglect, and unfairness, yet I had not given up. I learned that determination was not about proving others wrong. It was about proving to myself that I was capable of overcoming obstacles and achieving my goals. Each lecture attended, each exam aced, and each challenge met built my confidence and shaped my character. I began to take quiet pride in my perseverance, knowing that my work ethic was a reflection of who I was, not what others thought of me. Beyond academic accomplishments, I felt a deep sense of emotional growth. I was no longer the girl crushed by favoritism or weighed down by envy. I had learned to focus on my own path, to value my efforts, and to celebrate achievements privately if necessary. I could enjoy success without needing anyone else's praise, and that independence gave me a strength I hadn't felt before. The satisfaction was quiet but profound. I had created a life based on effort, not luck or favoritism. I felt capable, prepared, and ready for whatever came next. My parents' inability to fully recognize my achievements no longer mattered. What counted was that I had risen above the challenges, and my future was mine to shape. The sense of accomplishment, earned through determination and resilience, became one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. A few months after I settled into college life, my parents approached me unexpectedly. Keelan's music career had collapsed entirely, and they wanted my help. They spoke with urgency, almost desperation, explaining how badly he needed financial support and guidance. I listened quietly, noticing the subtle panic in their voices. It was clear they were beginning to realize that their decisions had consequences, and for the first time, they seemed aware of the mistake they had made years ago when they chose to give my college fund to Keelan. They spoke of regret, their words heavy with guilt. They admitted that they had misjudged me, and that they wished they had supported my ambitions instead of constantly comparing me to Keelan. At that moment, I felt a mixture of emotions, frustration, disappointment, and a lingering sense of injustice. Their confessions seemed sincere on the surface, but deep down, I knew that their recognition came far too late to undo the hurt I had carried for so many years. That evening, I asked to speak with them alone. We sat in the living room, the air thick with tension. I told them everything I had felt, the anger, the sadness, and the betrayal. I spoke calmly but firmly, recounting how they had given away my college fund, how they had overlooked my hard work, and how their favoritism toward Keelan had shaped my childhood and early adulthood. I wanted them to understand the impact of their choices, not to argue, but to finally face the truth. As I spoke, they nodded and murmured apologies, saying they wished they could make things right. I heard their words, but I didn't react with the relief they might have expected. I had realized long ago that I didn't need validation from anyone, not even my parents. Their apologies could not erase the years I had struggled, the nights I had cried, or the sacrifices I had made alone. I acknowledged their remorse, but I remained composed, understanding that my strength and accomplishments had been earned independently of their support. That conversation, though difficult, solidified a boundary I had been building quietly over time. I decided that I would help where I could, but I would no longer let their mistakes or judgments influence my emotions or self-worth. The betrayal they had caused was undeniable, yet I refused to let it control my life any longer. By facing them directly, I reclaimed a part of myself that had been overshadowed by their decisions and favoritism. In that moment, I felt a sense of calm and empowerment. I had confronted the betrayal, spoken my truth, and maintained control over my feeling. Their recognition, though welcome, was no longer necessary for me to feel validated. I knew my path was mine alone, and the confidence I had built through years of struggle and perseverance could not be shaken by anyone's guilt or regret. The day of my graduation arrived, and as I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, I felt a mixture of pride, relief, and quiet satisfaction. Years of sacrifices, sleepless nights, and constant effort had led to this moment. Not only had I completed medical school, but I had done so at the top of my class. The recognition from professors and peers felt rewarding, but the deeper satisfaction came from knowing that I had achieved everything on my own terms, without relying on anyone who had doubted me. Keelan, meanwhile, was still struggling. His music career had not recovered, and he had begun to feel the weight of his earlier recklessness. Eventually, he came to me, humbly asking for financial help. There was none of the arrogance or entitlement he had once carried. Instead, I saw nervousness and an unfamiliar humility. Watching him approach me that way, I realized just how far the roles had reversed. The power that had once belonged entirely to him and my parents now rested in my hands. When he asked for assistance, I took a deep breath and calmly explained that I had worked hard to build my own life, and I could not provide the support he needed. My tone was polite but firm, and I made it clear that my focus was on continuing my career and helping others, not rescuing him from the consequences of his own choices. I could see the surprise in his eyes, a mix of respect and disappointment, as he realized that he could no longer take my efforts for granted. I didn't need to speak about my parents or confront them about past mistakes. I didn't need to make anyone feel guilty or embarrassed. The shift in circumstances itself was enough. My achievements, the life I had built through determination and resilience, served as the ultimate form of revenge. There was no need for anger or vindictiveness. Success alone was more powerful than any words or punishments could ever be. Standing in my own strength, I understood that revenge didn't have to involve cruelty. It could be quiet, deliberate, and deeply satisfying. By focusing on my goals, persevering through challenges, and refusing to let others' decisions dictate my worth, I had created a reality where I was in control. Keelan's failures were a reminder of how choices and discipline shape outcomes, and I could now watch without resentment, knowing I had risen above. That day, I felt an extraordinary sense of liberation. I didn't need approval, validation, or acknowledgement from anyone to prove my value. My success spoke for itself, and the satisfaction of achieving what I had set out to do was richer than anything I could have imagined. Revenge had been achieved not through confrontation, but through the undeniable proof of my own capabilities. I had turned the betrayal I endured into a triumph that no one could take away. A few years after graduation, I finally opened my own clinic. It was a modest building, but it represented everything I had worked for: hard work, determination, and independence. The focus of my clinic was on helping children and young women pursue their goals, particularly those who faced obstacles similar to what I had experienced. Every patient who walked through the doors reminded me why all the struggles had been worth it. I could see the spark of ambition in their eyes, and I felt proud knowing I could help nurture it. The opening ceremony was small but meaningful. To my surprise, my parents attended. They walked through the doors, their expressions a mixture of pride, awe, and disbelief. They saw firsthand the results of my years of dedication. For the first time, they seemed to understand just how much I had accomplished despite their earlier neglect and favoritism toward Keelan. It was a quiet, humbling moment for them, and I could tell they realized they had underestimated me all along. Keelan was also present, standing off to the side, observing silently. His gaze lingered on the clinic, the patients, and the staff I had assembled. He saw how organized everything was, how well I managed the team, and how much impact my work had on the community. There were no words spoken between us, but I could sense his quiet acknowledgement. Talent alone wasn't enough. Discipline, perseverance, and focus were what made the real difference. The same attributes he had once ignored or dismissed were now the very things that had defined my success. As I walked through the clinic, interacting with patients and staff, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had overcome every betrayal, every setback, and every doubt placed in my path. The challenges I faced with my parents and Keelan had shaped me, but they no longer held power over my emotions or choices. Instead, they had strengthened my resolve, sharpened my focus, and reinforced my belief in myself. I realized that true satisfaction came not from revenge in the traditional sense, but from the quiet triumph of achieving something meaningful despite the odds. Opening this clinic was my statement, not of anger or resentment, but of resilience, intelligence, and perseverance. I had transformed the pain I endured into something constructive, something that could inspire and support others. Looking around at the clinic, the smiling faces of children, and the hopeful eyes of young women, I understood that I had finally created a life that reflected my values and abilities. I had taken control of my destiny, proving to myself that I was capable of far more than anyone had imagined. In that moment, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment and freedom. I had turned betrayal into opportunity, neglect into motivation, and doubt into achievement. The journey had been long and difficult, but standing there, I knew I had succeeded on my own terms. Sitting alone in my office late one evening, I reflected on everything I had been through. The betrayal I faced years ago had cut deeply, leaving scars I didn't even realize existed at the time. My parents had chosen Keelan over me, dismissing my dreams and my efforts. I had felt anger, sadness, and confusion, and at moments it seemed like those feelings might overwhelm me. But now, looking back, I understood that the hurt I experienced had shaped me in ways that no comfort or apology could have. I realized that pain, when faced with determination, could be transformed into something meaningful. Every struggle, every lonely night of studying, every penny saved had been building toward this moment. I didn't need anyone else to validate my dreams or provide opportunity. I had forged my own path, step by step, proving to myself that I was capable of achieving what I wanted. The independence I had gained was more valuable than any recognition I might have sought from others. Quietly, I spoke to myself, acknowledging the journey I had traveled. I didn't need their approval to feel proud. I had created a life that reflected my values, my effort, and my resilience. I had taken the betrayal I endured and turned it into motivation, and through that process, I discovered strength I never knew I had. It was a personal victory, one that no one could diminish or take away. There was also a subtle satisfaction in seeing how the world had responded to my accomplishment. Keelan's earlier advantages had not guaranteed success, and my parents' favoritism had not determined my worth. The life I had built on discipline, focus, and perseverance became a silent answer to the doubts and dismissals I had endured. Success itself had become the quiet, powerful form of revenge I had never needed to force. It was not fueled by anger, but by the satisfaction of knowing that I had done it all on my own terms. As I looked around my office, thinking about the clinic, the young patients I had helped, and the future I was shaping, I felt a profound sense of closure. The journey had been filled with challenges, betrayal, and moments of despair, but it had led to growth, fulfillment, and purpose. I had taken what once felt like weakness and turned it into a source of strength. I wanted anyone listening to know that betrayal can hurt deeply, but it doesn't have to define your life. Determination and persistence can transform pain into triumph. Life's success, built through effort, courage, and resilience, is often the most powerful response to those who doubted or wronged you. In the quiet moments of reflection, I felt proud, content, and free, knowing I had turned hardship into achievement, disappointment into motivation, and injustice into a legacy I could be proud of. Do you think I made the right choice by focusing on myself and not helping Keelan? Or should I have forgiven my parents sooner? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories like mine.